Today on Investigate TV Plus,
his first day, he went to work. It was going to be very hot.
Scorching temperatures can create deadly conditions for outdoor workers.
He finished his shift, and within an hour, he was dead.
Why this family says their son's death was preventable, and how new proposed protections aim to keep workers safe from dangerous heat.
Plus, the path to parenthood isn't always linear.
My doctors did not want me to carry a pregnancy, but I was determined that I wanted a child.
We share a family's journey with surrogacy and take an in-depth look at the patchwork of laws across the country that could be roadblocks for hopeful parents.
Then, a family reunion more than 11 years in the making.
In the back of our mind, I think there was an inkling, a fragment of hope that someday we would see him again.
In-depth stories that inform and inspire. You're watching Investigate TV Plus.
Dehydration, heat stroke, hospitalization, even death. The dangers of extreme heat are well documented. I'm Tisha Powell.
And I'm Lee Zurich. We found more people are dying from the effects of scorching temperatures. The latest available numbers show more than 2,000 in 2023.
But what if your job requires you to be outside or in a warehouse with no air conditioning in the middle of the summer?
Reporter Heather Graff explains the concern and shows you one family's devastating loss amid a push to better protect workers from the heat.
The bright blue signage stands out in this somber cemetery.
Every week we got somewhere to go.
And for Jim and Kathy Barber,
Could be 2 or 3 times.
that's intentional.
It gives us comfort.
Tributes to their son.
He loved the Bills, was a big fan in them.
Whether it's support for his favorite football team or handmade gifts from his nieces and nephews. Even the engraving on Tim Barber's tombstone.
We had the palette put on there and the brushes because he was an artist.
All of it is focused on how he lived instead of how he died.
No mom and dad should ever get a call like that.
It was July of 2020, and Tim had just been hired as a construction laborer, part of the crew building this bridge in Geneseo, New York.
His first day, he went to work. It was going to be very hot.
Jim and Kathy recall Tim didn't look good when he came home after that first day working in 90-degree temperatures.
Because I didn't get a lunch today. I never got a lot of water today. I said, what?
And he was just very quiet that night.
Lethargic. He didn't say much at dinner.
What this family didn't know, what they couldn't know, is that Tim's second day on the job would kill him.
The last words I said to him, I says, you eat that lunch and you drink that water today.
The Barbers later learned Tim had spent hours sorting bolts in direct sunlight and collapsed as he walked to his car.
He finished his shift, and within an hour, he was dead.
An autopsy confirmed the 35-year-old died from hyperthermia, also known as heat-related illness. The U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration investigated and fined Tim's employer, saying the company failed to implement safeguards to protect him. The violation report noted Tim was working alone, with no shade, and was not acclimated to the hot environment, having just started his employment there.
It was totally preventable.
Government data shows workplace deaths caused by heat exposure have increased in recent years, with 55 such deaths in 2023 alone. And the Department of Labor has said nearly 3 out of 4 workers who die from heat-related causes do so in their first week on the job. So, under the Biden administration in 2024, the DOL announced a plan to create the first ever federal protections for people working in extreme heat, both outdoors and indoors, in industries such as construction, agriculture, and manufacturing. The proposed rule would require employers to develop heat acclimatization protocols for new hires, aiming to gradually increase workloads so the body has time to adjust. It would also set trigger points at which employers must take certain steps. When the heat index reaches 80 degrees, they would need to ensure workers have drinking water and allow for rest breaks if needed. And at a heat index of 90 degrees, employers would have to provide at least one 15-minute break every 2 hours and set up a system to monitor staff for signs of heat-related illness.
The reality is that the only way that all workers will be protected, and especially the most vulnerable workers will be protected, is through federal action.
In September of 2024, the then acting Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, hosted a roundtable discussion in Tucson, Arizona, pushing the proposal, but also acknowledging it's still a long way from a done deal. And there is some opposition. For instance, certain industry groups have voiced concerns that a nationwide blanket threshold for heat protections just won't work.
The one-size-fits-all that concerns us is triggers at where the standard kicks in.
Bradley Sant is Vice President of Safety and Education for the American Road and Transportation Builders Association.
At 80 degrees, standards kick in for everybody. Well, that's a little different for the workers in Tucson who work in 80-degree temperatures, 300 days of the year, versus people in Buffalo who work in them maybe 100 days. So we think there needs to be some flexibility in there to allow the employers to keep their workers safe in the conditions that they understand and know well.
If it does take effect as currently written, do you see this ending up in court?
That's a hard one to predict. Likely, it could end up in court.
And on the other side of the debate are organizations like the National Safety Council, where advocates say federal heat standards to protect workers are long overdue.
It is overdue. Heat is becoming a greater and greater contributor to deaths. Heat illness is more and more prevalent in work sites. And as heat and record-breaking temperatures become the new normal, this threat is only going to grow.
Over here are just photographs of him from growing up over the years.
As for Kathy and Jim Barber,
This was his college graduation.
they will forever wonder, what if heat protections had been mandated on Tim's job site?
If these were implemented, he'd be alive today.
The Barbers would also like to see tougher enforcement and oversight of employers.
Where's the accountability? You got to have some tight policies and say, this is what we're going to do if you don't follow it.
Because if something doesn't change, they fear many more families might end up here,
I miss you every day.
at a gravesite and grieving.
Rest in peace.
It is important to note this Biden-era proposal for worker heat protections was not finalized before he left office. When we reached out to the Department of Labor under the Trump administration, a spokesperson said they had no updates as of February 2025. We also spoke to a professor at American University who has spent decades studying policymaking related to the climate and environment. And I asked if these types of proposals can be difficult to enact.
I've studied so many failed climate policies that have tried to go through the Congress or have tried to come from the executive branch and have been canceled. Historically, there is a ton of precedent for Republicans coming into the White House and getting rid of any climate policies they can.
We can tell you some states have taken action on this. In 2024, Maryland became the 6th state to issue heat illness prevention regulations for workers. Meanwhile, in Florida and Texas, state laws there ban local governments from enacting their own heat safety policies.
Still ahead, sniffing out science. We introduce you to the lab helping scientists unearth the past.
Plus,
Who's going to carry a baby for us? Like that's a tough thing, you know?
a labor of love delivers new hope for one family.
So for me, it was no big deal.
We share their inspiring story and examine some barriers parents face when it comes to surrogacy. For couples who can't conceive, a beacon of hope to grow their family is through a surrogate pregnancy.
According to the Cleveland Clinic, the most common type of surrogacy is a gestational surrogacy, where one person carries and delivers a child for another couple or person. This is most often achieved through in vitro fertilization, or IVF.
As the technology developed, so did interest in the possibility of surrogates getting paid. According to the group Circle Surrogacy, first-time surrogates can earn between $55,000 and $70,000.
However, making money from a surrogate pregnancy is illegal in 2 states.
One of them is Louisiana, where a cheer coach wanted to grow her family by paying a surrogate, but wasn't allowed.
Reporter Elizabeth Vowell shows us how a friend stepped up to help her become a mom.
5 legs. There you go. Come on, Izzy.
Rachel Pearson is the owner of Cheer Force Athletics.
Kick it. Better timing. Let's go. You got it.
For nearly 25 years, she and her close team of coaches have helped hundreds of athletes every year chase their dreams of big stunts.
Come on, kids.
And bigger trophies.
When you do competitive cheer, I see them more than I see my own family.
Down 1, feet, and down 7.
But there was a dream of her own she struggled to make happen.
Even when I was a little girl, I was the one that was, playing with all my little cousins, taking care of them, so I always wanted kids.
Rachel has a congenital heart defect. That and other medical complications meant getting pregnant was out of the question.
My doctors did not want me to carry a pregnancy, but I was determined that I wanted a child.
So Rachel and her husband turned to surrogacy, which presented another challenge.
Okay, who's gonna carry a baby for us? Like that's a tough thing,
Louisiana only passed a law outlining the legal requirements for surrogacy in 2016.
It's pretty common.
Attorney Amy Kern specializes in helping families struggling with fertility and helped shape the legislation. But she says lawmakers did not lay an easy path. In Louisiana, there has to be a medical need for a surrogate. The embryos have to come from the intended parents, who must be a married couple. And before the process can start, both the parents and the carrier must go through several court filings and legal hoops to protect everyone involved. You also can't pay a gestational carrier, which Kern sees as the biggest barrier.
The reason that's a barrier is that, it's kind of, apparent, but, you're not able to compensate them. So you've got to try to find someone who's willing to be pregnant for someone else, give birth, and then have that baby not be their biological child, but, go home with someone else, which is a lot to ask.
Rachel did have someone who was willing to try. But after years of rounds of IVF and failed transfers, it seemed her dream of a baby would remain just that. When her doctor suggested trying again with another carrier, Rachel thought back to her other family at Cheer Force.
There we go. Good, Brindley.
And her longtime friend and coach, Kay Schenk.
So then I just started thinking, and I'm like, I have someone that I think I could ask. And so it took me a while to get the nerves up to even ask.
Kay had already given birth to 3 kids and knew about Rachel's struggles to start a family. So when she got a message asking if she'd be willing to be a gestational carrier,
yes. No hesitation. So for me, it was no big deal. It was no big sacrifice or anything like that. I loved Rachel and her husband, Kevin. I just felt like they deserved a baby, and it's like, if I can do something to help, yes.
Finally, after 10 years of trying and failing and waiting and praying.
Hey, can you meet me outside the gym? I got something to tell you. And I'm like, what? And she's like, look. And she's showing me a pregnancy test. And I'm like, what? What? She's like, I'm really good at reading these things. And I'm pretty sure this says positive.
Kay gave birth to little Nora on Rachel's 41st birthday.
She weighed the same as me, and I think she was even the same length as me. It was crazy, but it was a special day. It was the best birthday present ever that I could, ever get to this day. She's my best friend and my birthday buddy.
Nora is now 5 years old, and while her Nana Kay is still very much a part of their lives.
Oh, she won't give me the time of day. She's been like that her whole life.
There we go.
Surrogacy is often surrounded by misconceptions and questions, and the process is not easy in Louisiana. But for Kay and Rachel and Nora, it's simple. It was a gift of love.
We've created a bond that's here to stay.
The only other state that prohibits compensation for surrogacy is Nebraska. According to the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, surrogacy laws differ across the country. For example, in Tennessee and South Dakota, there's no law that specifically permits or denies surrogacy. In states like Ohio, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania, a judge must sign off on the agreement.
Still ahead,
You get past the South Baggage Claim kiosk.
proof that persistence pays off.
He made it home 11 years later.
We take you to the reunion years in the making and explain how his pet ended up hundreds of miles from home.
Plus, we show you the effort to preserve the land where ancestors are buried. How a man and his four-legged friend work to protect history. At the Fletcher Allen Cemetery, Frank Washington walks us through the grounds where many of his ancestors are buried.
How many people are buried here, would you say?
Right here, we're close to like 70, 75 people in this area here.
Some of them have their headstones marked, others are marked by just stones. A common practice when enslaved Africans bury their family members, names not written but clear signs their lives existed.
These are usually the only identifying markers you would have for graves that, from that time frame. It's either something like this or a smaller stone like that.
We found many African American grave sites just like this constantly face dangers of being erased or destroyed by development.
We're being devalued as a family. We're being devalued as a race. We're saying that, well, you're not important, your grave site's not important, your history is not important.
There's a group of people working to preserve that same kind of history at Richmond National Battlefield Park in Virginia.
They believe it holds a cemetery for formerly enslaved Africans and turn to an expert to help identify any remains.
Reporter Sarah Shackles introduces us to the archaeologist with 4 paws.
A lot of history there. Alleged that in the front room on the first floor of this house, Patrick Henry married Sarah Shelton.
It was also a significant site during the Civil War. But what archaeologists really want to know is what and who is buried on this sprawling farm.
We're looking for unmarked cemeteries that could be associated with the enslaved people that lived here and worked here on the Shelton plantation.
The property spans 125 acres, so it takes a special approach to cover all this ground. Enter 6-year-old chocolate lab Abby, the barchaeologist, reporting for duty. Abby is specially trained to sniff out human remains, very, very old ones.
She's actually searching for odor that's being emitted from chemical compounds produced during the decomposition process. We have had success locating remains dating up to 2,000 years old here in the Southeast.
Paul Martin travels around the country with Abby, helping find unmarked cemeteries. When Abby marks a scent, she sits on the spot, and Martin records the GPS data. Abby is paid with praise, treats, and her favorite squeaky duck.
We came in with ground penetrating radar, have collected that, processed it, and it does appear that they have located some burials.
We're very excited to see what data Paul's able to provide us, because these are sacred spaces.
The National Park Service says once they identify the unmarked graves, the plan is not to dig them up to investigate further, but rather to honor the space and respect it.
Up next, a feline with 9 lives.
If he had been out there for maybe a day or 2 more, he was for sure going to die.
Is found after 11 years.
I haven't seen him since June of 2013.
We show you the special reunion between a man and his cat. Many cat owners know their feline friends as lovable but elusive. According to researchers at the University of Queensland in Australia, 15% of cat owners will lose their pet at least once in a 5-year period. Most missing cats are found within a little more than a quarter mile from their point of escape.
A man recently reunited with his cat, who wasn't found down the street, but hundreds of miles away in another state.
You didn't misread that either. That is true, right? Reporter Joshua Skinner was there when they came together after 11 years apart.
At the world's busiest airport, people move and people wait.
It's been 11 and a half years.
Dave Dexter is waiting for an old friend, Rutherford.
I haven't seen him since June of 2013.
But as people look towards arrivals, Dexter looks the opposite way.
In the back of our mind, I think there was an inkling, a fragment of hope that someday we would see him again.
Finding anyone in this mayhem can be tough.
You'll see us when you walk in.
Especially if, like Dexter, you flew in from Wisconsin for the reunion.
You get past the South Baggage Claim kiosk.
Eventually, they do find each other.
Nice to meet you too.
But Rutherford is not a man.
Hi, May.
Rutherford in there.
Nor a woman.
Hey man, how's it going?
But a cat.
Rutherford B. Cat, I think, was his official Christian name.
And the Arbeiter family has driven him here.
I can't believe you're here.
From Dillard, Georgia, 11.5 years and 806 miles from where he disappeared in Oregon, Wisconsin.
He was found on the border of North Carolina in Dillard, Georgia, on the side of the road, laying down on his side, not moving.
Rescued by teenagers and brought back to life by the Arbeiter Veterinary Hospital.
If he had been out there for maybe a day or two more, he was for sure going to die.
Not only did he survive,
how could this possibly happen?
With a new name,
call him Rutherford B. Strays,
and a much shorter trip back to a warm home.
What else can you do but just feel good for the guy? He made it home 11 years later.
So how did Rutherford go missing in the first place? Dave told us that he's an outdoor cat and he always returned home. One night, Rutherford came home with a greasy residue similar to that of a car engine. So Dave's best guess is that Rutherford crawled up underneath a car and accidentally hitched a ride. Dave told us he doesn't believe Rutherford was homeless the entire time because he's too friendly.
Imagine 11 years without the cat and then seeing the cat again like that.
What a story. They're known to come home after a long time.
They are. 11 years? Oh yeah, I know, right?
That's a long time.
That is a long time. That's it for us on Investigate TV Plus. We won't be gone that long. I'm Lee Zurich.
And I'm Tisha Powell. Thanks for watching.
Today on Investigate TV Plus, finding potentially toxic pipes installed more than a century ago.
We have a legacy of an industry that promoted its product, ignored the public health warnings, and now we're paying the price.
How promoting use of lead pipes in the past is now forcing cities to dig up their streets.